Well, welcome everybody to another edition of 100 Yards of Football. This is the college edition, the Super 7 edition. We just did an NFL show a few moments ago where we were talking about the NFL shows, and happy Thanksgiving, by the way, to everybody. And so this is one of the last games. There's still an Army-Navy game to take place, but the last regular season game before you have your conference championships. And there are major implications for a number of teams that are out there, and we want to discuss that. We want to thank you for tuning in. So for Logan Landers, our producer and engineer, for Vincent Turner, who is our host of the show, thank you so much for tuning in to our Super 7 edition, the college football edition of 100 Yards of Football. Our local games, which we always want to make sure that we pay attention to what's going on here in the state of Georgia and the teams that are a part of it. Well, there's one of those games that's going to be taking place in Athens, and that'll be Georgia Tech visiting the University of Georgia. We'll talk about that one in specific in just a few moments. Also, we have Appalachian State in the Sun Belt. They're going to close their year with Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern 7-4. They're having a great year thus far. They win this game 8-4, and they're looking at, obviously they're going to be in a bowl game, but really they could be in one of those nicer games that you get to play a little bit later on, not the December 12th game. You'll be looking at games that are closer to Christmas and New Year's. Coastal Carolina at 5-6. They need to get a win to be bowl eligible, and they'll be in Atlanta at Center Park Stadium taking on Georgia State, who had a great win last week against Texas State. Kennesaw State will finish their season. They are at Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech is normally a really solid program. This year they're having a little bit of a down year, so it'll be interesting to see if Kennesaw can get a squeaker out there in Louisiana. And then finally, we want to congratulate Valdosta State. They had a bye last week, but they get to host their first playoff game here. They'll be going against Miles College. Miles ended up beating Carson Newman last week, and they'll be on the road. They'll be down south in Valdosta taking on the Blazers. So that's a look at some of the local teams that are still in action. And now let's look at our Super 7. The Super 7 is what we put together over the season to kind of highlight some of the games that we feel that are really important and they're going to be fun to watch. And we'll talk about those at length. But guys, if you don't mind, before I get the games that we're talking about, don't include Oregon State and Boise State. What a big game that's going to be taking place in Idaho. And then Miami of Ohio is going to be going against Bowling Green. That'll be for a conference championship, or at least the right to play there. The Egg Bowl, Mississippi State against Mississippi. We're not going to be talking about that one today. Tennessee, Vincent, the University of Tennessee, the Volunteers will be taking on Vanderbilt. That game has always got huge implications, at least locally, for the state of Tennessee. We'll avoid that one as well. If you're in Arizona, ASU and the University of Arizona, they'll be playing each other. North Carolina State and UNC, Florida State, that used to have national implications, not so much this year. Washington and Oregon, Big Ten implications there. Of course, Oregon, the number one team in the country. And then obviously one other game we're not going to talk about is Purdue going to Indiana. Now, Indiana with one loss, lost to the number 2 team in the country, guys, in Ohio State. If they don't get invited into the top 12, what a shame, because Notre Dame only has one loss right now, and they'll be taking on SC. We'll talk about that in a moment. But certainly Indiana and Sarketti has all kinds of reasons to say we should belong in the hunt. But anyways, what games do you stick out that we're not going to talk about? Logan, let's start with you.
Yeah, for me, just because of the pure insanity that happened in college football this past weekend with all of the upsets and, the SEC teams falling out and whatnot, why not go to the top? Why not go Washington, Oregon? We saw some crazy things in college football all season long. Why not a little late season upset here from Washington, a team who you never know. They are 6-5 on the year, taking on Oregon. And look, Oregon's undefeated, 11-0. Obviously, they're going to be the favorites, but it's been a crazy season. Why not throw another wrinkle in the feather here and see how this one goes? Like I said, it's a rivalry game. So all these teams, they know the history. They know that, look, this game, even if your record doesn't indicate it, it means a lot to your school pride, to that team that you see on the sideline, to the colors that you wear each and every Saturday. So that's what it means to me. That's what it means to these teams. And I think I'm gonna take a little bit more of a look at Washington and Oregon this upcoming weekend and see. All right, look, let's see. Look, everyone's gonna pick Washington to get beat by 20, if not more. But you never know. Rivalry games always bring out the best in certain players. We'll see how the Huskies can do against an undefeated, #1 ranked Oregon Ducks. That's my game I'm going to be looking out for that we're not going to be talking about today. What about you, Vincent?
Any rivalry games, Vincent, for you that we're not going to discuss today that you wish we would have?
Now, y'all know me. I'm from the 901.
Really?
Memphis, Tennessee. Of course, I'm going to have my eyes on Vanderbilt in Tennessee.
Yeah.
That game has always been special to me because there's a lot of people out in my neighborhood who have attended Vandy in Tennessee. There's been several guys I know personally that played at the University of Tennessee, Carlton Peoples, Mark Studaway. Shouts out to y'all today. Vanderbilt, Wayman Buggs, who's an outstanding all-SEC first-team receiver in 1981. Bear Bryant said he was the greatest receiver he ever seen play college football out of Memphis Hamilton. Of course, I'm going to be watching that game. And it's a big game because Tennessee, to the Vols Nation, and this is from my nephew, Mr. Ronnie Foster, who is a UT grad, don't slip up against Vanderbilt because you will not be making the college football playoffs. You got everything in your hands. All you have to do is win this football game, and you will be in the college football playoffs. And, of course, the Egg Bowl. Y'all know my parents from the state of Mississippi. I've been following that game for ages. The Ole Miss Rebels. What more can you say? I'm not going to talk about the Manning boys. I'm going to talk about their daddy when he was running in that series in the 60s, Mr. Archie Manning. Then the Mississippi State Bulldogs, Johnny Cooks. Oh, my God, Walter Packer, Rocky Felker. And the Egg Bowl gets very serious. If you remember back in 1999 when Ole Miss played Mississippi State, they played them on Thanksgiving night. There was a big fight. And Tommy Tuberville, I think, got hit in the head with a helmet. Of course, I'm going to be following those two games. I'm a Southern boy. Those games are dear to my heart. Back to you, Harper.
Well, you mentioned the 901, Vincent, so let's start with your Memphis Tigers. They're 9-2, and they're going to be taking on the number 18th ranked Tulane Wave. Now, I'm going to tell you one thing about Tulane. They can play. If you haven't watched them this year, folks, this is a good football team. They are ranked in 6th in the country in scoring. They average 40 points a game, but their defense comes out. They give up 17 points a game. I'm not picking this game just because of you, Vincent. This one has American Athletic Conference Championship written all over it. The winner gets to qualify. So what are your thoughts here? Let's start with you regarding Memphis taking on Tulane.
But since you put some emphasis on that Memphis, I'm going to be honest with y'all. When Memphis upset Florida State in the second week of the season, y'all don't even know this. I was thinking college football playoffs. Ooh. Harper, you know I was excited. And Memphis lets me down as they always. They come back and get ball rushed by Navy 56-44. And I thought the days of back in the day, Memphis State football was going to have a new legacy. Playing in the college football playoffs, that's never been done in the city of Memphis. And I thought about the days of Keith Simpson walking back through them doors, Ernest Gray, Keith Wright, Keith Butler, head coach Richard Williamson, who used to play who played under Bear Bryant. I said, this team has got a chance. And then they dropped the egg against Navy. And to be honest, my heart was broke. Harper, you brought up a good point. That Tulane team is a very serious football team. They are a college football playoff team. And just to show you how much this hurt, that I got to take Tulane in this game. Memphis lost to Navy 56-44. Tulane shut out Navy last week. Shut them out 35-0. And they only gave up 113 yards total. John Summerall is a hell of a football coach because everybody thought when Winnie Fretz went over to Houston, Tulane was going to take a step back. Like the man, Mr. Harper LeBel said, you better put respect on the University of Tulane, the Green Wave. To you, Logan.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Memphis still they're having a really good season, Vincent. I mean, look, 9-2, that's a great year so far. But like you said, just a couple of blips along the way, a couple of slip ups, but overall they've looked sharp. They've looked good. And as for Tulane, as we know, they are undefeated in conference play, 7-0 in the American. So they have just been beating up their opponents left and right, 9-2 overall. They have the same record, but they have some really solid players overall at Tulane. I mean, obviously, you got to look at Mensah, their quarterback, who's gotten over 2,000 yards, 18 TDs on the season for him. And then Hughes, their running back, who's got 1,200 yards carrying and 15 touchdowns on the ground. Look, this is an offensive juggernaut in Tulane. They've got a really good team. And I think Memphis, look, they're scrappy, right? They've got some really solid players. Of course, Seth Hennigan, your quarterback's going to be getting over 3,000 yards in total after this bowl game here. I like Rock Taylor as well, the wide receiver. But for me, Vincent, I know it's going to hurt a little bit, but I got to go with the Green Wave right now. They're riding a wave of momentum. I'll throw that one out there.
I don't have no problem with that. There's much respect.
Understood. Harper?
Yeah. Some of the numbers here, Tulane has 30 sacks defensively, the 12 interceptions. They have 8 fumble recoveries, so they're going to get the ball out. That's one of the things about them that is impressive to me. I mentioned the 17 points per game that they average. As a team, they've rushed for 31 touchdowns. They have 20 through the air, so there's a couple of things that they can do offensively in terms of scoring. I mentioned that they get 40 points a ball game, 40. So this is a team that can score. And they played through the division right now, through the conference, and done a magnificent job. So congratulations to them. They are 18th ranked right now. They win this game. They've got a chance, slim, but at least they're in. You know what I mean? It's like you can't win the lottery unless you buy a ticket. And you win this game, at least they'll have a ticket. And that hopefully will bode well for them. Second game we want to look at here locally, can't get much bigger than this one. You got Georgia Tech, 7-4. Probably a little disappointing right now. A couple of big wins, but lost to Louisville, lost to Notre Dame really hurt them. But they are bigger, they are faster, they are stronger than they've been in years. Remember, under the Paul Johnson era, no offense to anybody that played there, but their offense was basically a one-way, right? They're only going to run the ball. They are not going to pass it all, and I think that hurt their recruiting. Now their offensive linemen are enormous. Their defensive line is much bigger than it was. What do you think it's going to take for Tech? Vincent, we'll start with you to head into Athens and try to pull another upset against the University of Georgia. Is it possible?
House money. House money.
Yeah.
You got to be really impressed what Brent Key has done, man. As you just mentioned, Harper, Paul Johnson, he won, but let's be realistic here. Georgia Tech as a program is going to always stay in the middle of the pack. Hurt their recruiting, as you said, Harper. Now, Brent Key, I'm going to tell you this about Brent Key. They had some disappointing losses this year, no question about it, but think of the last 2 weeks. They're beating Miami, that was nationally ranked, and then beating North Carolina State.
Yep.
I wouldn't be surprised in the next couple of years Georgia Tech becomes a college football playoff team. Brent Key has done a hell of a job, man. Haynes King is a player. Eric Singleton is a player. Malik Rutherford is a player. Kyle Efford is a player. And you got to know that they're going to go into Athens not scared with house money. Not to those dogs. I said on the first show that we started doing it, and I'm going to get off what I said because I back up what I said. The 901 has spoken. I still say the University of Georgia is the best team in the country. Have they played up to their capabilities? Of course not. They've had a lot of problems. In the offensive line, they've had a lot of injuries. This is not a Georgia team that can run the football, but I still believe in their quarterback, Carson Beck. And I still say that the Bulldogs are the best team in the country. And I think on Saturday, they got a Georgia Tech team, a good football team coming in. I think Georgia's going to play at that level. Don't look at what they did last week against Marshall. A lot of people saying they gave up 266 yards rushing. But remember this as I look in the camera. Every time the game has been on the line for Georgia, they went into Austin, Texas. What happened, gentlemen? They beat Tennessee. They beat Tennessee 2 weeks ago. What happened, gentlemen? They was the most dominant football team on the field that day. And I'm going to tell you this. They've won a berth to play in the SC championship game. I think what we're going to see from here on out with the University of Georgia, I think we're going to see the old Georgia football teams that went back-to-back winning national championships. To you, Logan.
Yeah, this this isn't your normal, Georgia Tech, Georgia rivalry, because we've seen in years past, like Georgia Tech, they've had some rough seasons here lately, but this team has done a 180. They've been, like I said, they've had some disappointing losses, of course, but they've won some of the big games that they haven't won in years past, which is big for them. As we know, they beat Miami, who was undefeated at the time, big win over them. They got the win the other week as well. It was close nail-biter against NC State, and that was even without Haynes King, your quarterback. You had Philo in there filling in. King went out with, I believe, a chest injury. We'll see if that affects him in this upcoming ball game. But if Georgia Tech wants to win this game, Georgia has to come out slow like they have for feels like most of the season. Georgia is one of those teams that kind of creeps up, right? They get better as the clock goes forward, right, for each quarter. But if Georgia Tech wants to take advantage of that, you got to go full out assault in the first quarter. And Harper, when I say that, Georgia, they were tied against UMass after the first quarter last week. I'm not saying, look, we know they came out, they blew the doors off, and they got the big win. But if Georgia Tech wants a chance at pulling off this upset, you got to come out the gates hot. I think that's what you have to do if you're Tech. Look, this is a scrappy team, and this isn't just, like I said, I mentioned it in my opening, this isn't your normal Georgia Tech game. Georgia Tech, like you said, Vincent, they've got house money. They are fighting right now. And look, you always want to get the win over Big Brother, right? You always want to get the win over Georgia. They've already got an SEC championship game locked in. They're already good. Georgia Tech, they're looking to play spoiler. And why not cap off their year getting the biggest win of their season against Athens, in Athens also, mind you. This is going to be a road game for them. This is at home. This is at Bobby Dodd out in Georgia Tech. It might be a different story because we know how they've looked this year at home. On the road, look different. But I think ultimately Georgia, Carson Beck, limit your turnovers, obviously. We've talked about that here on the show. If you can do that, Georgia will get the win. But I think Georgia Tech is going to be a little bit more tougher than some people might give them credit for.
It's almost as if you made a great point there, Logan. It's almost as if they need to have Kirby and the rest of the coaching staff chew them out at halftime before they get themselves to the point where they're reminded that they're the best team in the country and they're sure not playing like it. But they are so good. Gosh, Vincent, you hit the nail on the head. They are a powerful football team. Now there's one that can rival them. And when I watched a little bit of this game last Saturday in Columbus, my gosh, offensive line, they are monsters. Ohio State will be hosting Michigan in the game that you can't say the word game because there's an M in it. You can't do it. So it's M week in Ohio. But the 10-1 Ohio State Buckeyes, Logan, we'll start with you. They certainly have impressed me. They dominated Indiana, even though they gave up a late touchdown to the Hoosiers. I think they said, not yet, anybody. We're still the best team. They had a close loss to Oregon on the road. Other than that, they've been flawless.
No, you're right about that, Harper. And when you look at this ball club, Ohio State's just got a bunch of bruisers, right? Some guys that if you're walking down an alleyway at night, you don't want to see them off to your left, to your right, because they got some big dudes up front, as you mentioned, on their O-line. They've got just so many weapons, no matter if it's on offense or defense. This team might be what Georgia was a couple of years ago, guys, in terms of how many people are going to get taken in the draft, because this Ohio State team is full of five-star players, full of guys who we're going to be talking about on Sundays here the next couple of months and years, no doubt about that. But when you look at this Ohio State team, like you said, only loss in their rear is going to be against Oregon, who's undefeated. They lost that game by, I believe, 1 point. So, I mean, it was a nail-biter. It was a great game they had. And Ohio State, they have just been steamrolling opponents. Look, Indiana last week, we knew that Indiana was the underdog in that one, even though they were undefeated at the time. And Kurt Signetti is still doing a great job out there with the Hoosiers. Hell, no one thought they were going to be at this record at this point in the season. But Ohio State and Ryan Day, they're on a mission this year, guys, because what's been the one thing that's said about Coach Day since he took over the program? He can't win the big game. He can't get it done. He can't win the national championship. We're waiting for that, and this team looks poised to take home their conference championship and make a really good run in the top 12 in the college football playoff. So I think Ohio State, look, they've got Howard, they've got Judkins, who's an absolute monster. Smith is your receiver. Their defense has so many just unbelievable talents. It'd take me a whole show to list them. But I think Michigan, Look, it's been a rough year for the Wolverines, right? We know that they've got absolutely purged in the draft. A lot of their great talent already left the system, went on to the NFL, who are doing their great things nowadays on Sundays. But like I said, they've lost all of their tough games this year, pretty much all of their ranked games except for one being against USC. Is how Michigan's went this year. So it's going to be an uphill battle for sure. But I think that in this one, Ohio State will roll and take home the win in this one. What about you, Vincent?
Every time this game comes around, Michigan and Ohio State, it's special because in my memory, I always think about that 69 game. The super sophomores trying to repeat and be the first Ohio State team to go back-to-back. And I think about that game, Jim Otis, Rex Kern, Jack Tatum, John Brockington. They get up 12-0 on Michigan. And then all of a sudden, Michigan scores 24 straight points. Don Moorhead, the great Jim Mandich, Tom Darden, Henry Hill. And I come to this game today, Michigan and Ohio State. Well, obviously, we know Michigan is not the team that were last year. What they lose, 14 players to the NFL draft. J.J. McCartney, Blake Corn, the young man right now that's out there, Junior Colson, is playing for Mr. Jim Harbaugh. They had an outstanding year last year. 6-5, they're down a little bit. Going into this game, and bring up the adage again, house money. Play to be better and just see, can you stay on the field with the Ohio State Buckeyes? Logan, you said everything I don't need to say about Ohio State. They got the most talented team in the country. You forgot to mention the young man that plays safety that lives up there near our host today, Mr. Harper LeBel, Mr. Caleb Downs.
Of course.
Showed out last week in that game against Indiana with the punt return and several tackles. The only thing about the Buckeyes that's going to keep them from reaching the pinnacle and winning it all is Will Howard, their quarterback. When he plays well, and he played last week, didn't do anything too much, just managed the game, made a couple of plays, there's nobody on the face of earth outside Georgia, in my opinion, can stay on the field with the Ohio State Buckeyes. To you, Mr. Harper LeBel.
It's interesting when you look at Michigan's schedule, right? Texas, USC, they played Washington. Illinois was ranked when they played them. Oregon was number one in the country. Indiana is highly ranked. They played some tough opponents. They're 6-5. They've tried to fight through it, but they just can't score, guys. That's the biggest issue I see is they don't pass the ball well, and they're ranked 104th. They only average 23 points a ball game. Defense is okay. They got 31 sacks. 9 interceptions and 4 fumble recoveries. That's better than adequate, I would say. But compare that to the 35 sacks that Ohio State has, the 7 interceptions and the 8 fumble recoveries. They get the ball back almost once a ball game. We mentioned Will Howard, 26 touchdowns for him. But how about Quishon Judkins, 759 yards for him? Well, come on. But behind that, but remember, Travion Henderson also has 730 yards. The two of them together are a monster to get behind that offensive line. So 14 touchdowns alone just between those two guys. As a team, they have 24 touchdowns rushing, 28 in the air. They are a force to be reckoned with. So what a great game that's going to be at noon on Saturday. Another game that I'm going to be paying attention to, where on earth did South Carolina come from? I mean, out of nowhere, in my opinion, with the tough schedule that they've had and just their ability to stay afloat. And now they're playing a Clemson team where this game doesn't affect the ACC standings, but it certainly has South Carolina implications, right, to have bragging rights. Vincent, we'll start with you on this one. South Carolina and Clemson, they'll be playing in Memorial Stadium up there in Clemson. What a great game this is going to be.
Last night, I was looking up some information. One South Carolina team that can make the college football playoffs. It's going to be very interesting when the college football rankings come out tonight where they're going to really be placed. I'm going to tell you, I'm excited down there in Columbia for the University of South Carolina. If we do not put respect on Shane Beamer's name as a head coach, Frank's baby boy, I don't know what we're talking about. South Carolina was picked at the bottom. But this is a college football playoff team, gentlemen. 8-3, they going at a Clemson. I wouldn't be surprised they make the playoffs. Think about what they've done this year. They played Alabama close. They had LSU almost dead to rights and let that game get away. But look what they did to Oklahoma on the road. Look what they did with Texas A&M when everybody was saying Texas A&M was ready. And Shane Beamer's got that culture going on. There's going to be a lot of college football jobs coming open this season. SC, rumors that LSU don't like what Brian Kelly has done since he's been there. If I'm looking, and I'm looking at USC out there where you from, Harper, my eyeballs are going to be focusing on Shane Beamer. Think what he's done. The quarterback, Ladarius Sellers. Everybody was reading on that kid early on. Shane Beamer said he's going to get it together. He's played outstanding. Then Raheem Sanders comes over from the University of Arkansas. He gets in that South Carolina offense. He's a totally different player. And we don't have to talk about that defense. The transfer from Georgia Tech, Kyle Kennard, is a legitimate NFL first-round pick. And who did we do last week? My man, Mr. T.J. Sanders. Is he not a player, Harper?
Oh, man.
So I'm loving South Carolina. Now to the Clemson Tigers. Got to respect Dabo, the man who doesn't like the transfer portal. If Clemson hadn't lost to Louisville, boy, would they not have everything in their hands to get in the playoffs? Look at what they need to do. They need to win this football game. Some other things got to happen. But if they win this game, I would not be surprised, even if they don't play in the ACC championship game they get in. And I got a lot of respect for Dabo Swinney because he was very intimate. He was catching a lot of flack. Remember, after they lost to Georgia the first game of the year, there was people in Clemson, South Carolina calling for his head. Said he had went insane. He had lost it. And Dabo said, I got to get players that's going to fit my culture. When I look at it, under Dabo, Clemson has always had a strong defensive line. Pete Woods, T.J. Parker, DeMonte Capehart, Peyton Page, all those guys are going to be high NFL draft picks. And Cade Klubnik, the young man out of Austin, Texas, has played pretty good football for him. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a real big-time game for college football playoff recognition. These are two good football teams, man, that can easily get into the playoffs and cause some damage. But I'm going to tell you, I'm excited for Shane Beamer. He has set this up outside Deion Sanders, what he's done in Colorado. To me, Shane Beamer is the next best coach in college football as far as bringing this program from bottom to up right now. To you, Logan.
It's a good point, Vincent. And I mean, I don't think it's an overstatement to say that South Carolina might be one of the hottest teams in college football right now. I mean, look, this team was at 3-3 on the season. A lot of people said they were dead in the water. That being after that close loss to Alabama, right, who was still highly ranked at that time. And like 3-3, they said, all right, look, it's just going to be another middle of the road type of year for the Gamecocks. Wait till next year, then they'll see what they can do. But they've rattled off 5 straight wins. And it's been 5 impressive wins also. Like you went in there, you stomped Oklahoma 35-9. All right. Look, Oklahoma's had an up and down year. It is what it is. You can write that off. But then at the time, number 10, Texas A&M. You beat them by 24, 44-20, scoring that one. Then people start to say, okay, all right, if you get something here. You beat Vanderbilt, who has played spoiler this year, 28-7, big win on that one. Close game against Missouri, who they've had a really good year, 34-30. Hey, doesn't matter. A win is still a win. And then last week they beat up on Wofford 56-12, as you should. This is, as you said, this is a credit to Coach Beamer and also the rest of the coaching staff on this team. Because, look, it starts with the head coach, but it's also the assistants. It's also the specific position player coaches that are also doing work out there, making sure, getting in their guys' ears and saying, hey, just keep practicing. Just keep doing work. Keep studying film. Go in the locker room. Do another rep or two in the gym and just say, hey, you got to believe in this team. That's what South Carolina, that's what makes this team scary, is they're starting to believe in themselves. They're starting to believe the hype and say, hey, look, we went from a team that was bottom of the barrel, that was going to be written off, that wasn't going to have a lot of hype around them in the SEC. Everyone was talking about Texas and Oklahoma coming over. There's no one talking about South Carolina. But here they are, week 14 now, and they are on fire. Now, turn over to Clemson now. Like you said, Vincent, after that loss to Georgia, like I said, that's the first week of the year. Everyone was saying, all right, well, that's it. Clemson's done for. They don't want to go in the transfer portal. That's Dabo. That's him just being stingy and in his ways and whatnot. And then, it came out also that he's not going to answer questions on his podcast or whatnot. And that, that's just how he's supposed to be. He's not a fan of the media. He doesn't, like the fans. I don't care if he likes the fans or not. His team is doing great right now at 9-2. And the weapons with Klubnik, as you mentioned, he's looked solid this year. Same with Phil Moffa, the running back. That has been kind of a surprise for this Clemson team, is how well they have looked. But honestly, when I'm looking at this one, gentlemen, this is going to be a really solid game. We talked in the NFL about some really good games. This one might be my game of the week for college, just because it's two teams that are a little bit out of it. Clemson, like you said, they might be in the ACC championship game, but South Carolina, they're right there. They are right there. And if they can pull off this win, that would send shockwaves out there in South Carolina, and a great matchup. Like I said, it's a rivalry. You have two teams who are both just riding just some big waves right now. So I'm looking forward to this one. Give me South Carolina. I think I got to go with the hot hand in this one.
Well, both you guys have great points. I'm going to just do something real quick. I pulled this up while we were discussing the ACC standings right now. Start with SMU. Remember, the Mustangs, they're undefeated right now in the conference. They're 7-0. Clemson is 7-1 in the conference. They're 9-2 overall. And Miami is 6-1 in the conference. Here's the part about Clemson that if I was a hater, and I'm not, I'm just saying, look at their strength of schedule. They just finished Citadel. They lose to Georgia. That's the only ranked team that they've played so far, because they ended up they lost to Louisville, and Louisville's in the upper echelon of the conference, but they weren't ranked at the time. So Appalachian State, North Carolina State, Stanford, Florida State, all of those guys together, they won big. But they haven't played the same type of schedule that South Carolina has. I mean, that's just blatantly obvious right there. Let's give some credit to the Gamecocks. They beat Kentucky and lose to LSU. Now, Kentucky hasn't been ranked, but LSU was. They lose to them. They've played Ole Miss, Alabama, Oklahoma, who was not ranked, but you know how good Oklahoma was. Surprise Alabama, A&M, Missouri, and now a ranked Clemson team. I don't know how you argue if you're South Carolina, how we can't be in the playoff when you look at my schedule and who we've played. My goodness. So what a great game. And I agree with you, Logan. This could be a game of the week. It's certainly going to move up in my rankings. But the game of the year, if you're in Alabama, well, that's the Iron Bowl. The next one we're going to look at, Auburn at 5-6. If they win this game, they get to be bowl eligible. Do you not think that those guys are going to be motivated to play their very best? They go against an Alabama team that's coming off of a tremendous loss. It's almost like the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the World Cup all rolled into one when Oklahoma ended up beating Alabama last week. We'll start with you, Logan. What do you think about the Iron Bowl this year?
Well, I mean, when you look at this Iron Bowl, it's very interesting, right, in terms of the fact that Auburn's been up and down. We all know they had the big win against Texas A&M last week in quadruple overtime, for God's sake, 43-41, and what a lot of people might pick as their kind of game of the year. And then when you look at Alabama, this team has been up and down. I mean, if you listen to any, media personnel or any fans on social media, one week you'll hear them say, all right, we're going to the SEC championship. The tide is back. We're winning it all. And then what happened last week, gentlemen?
Oops.
I don't know what happened last week. 24-3 is what you put up against Oklahoma. You couldn't even get a touchdown, which that's not the Alabama I know. That's not, I know Nick Saban's gone, but Kalen DeBoer, I'm just saying, guys, if he loses this game, you might want to pack a hoodie, because you might not want to show your face in Tuscaloosa for a little bit after this one, because Vincent, the fans take this one dead serious down there. This is look, we always talk about Georgia Tech because we live in the state. But Alabama, Auburn, the Iron Bowl, we know all the classics they've had over the years. And if you're Alabama, you're coming off probably the worst loss of the season. You got to win this one if you want to, have any hope of staying in the top 12. As Harper said, they haven't released the playoff rankings yet, so we don't know where they lie at the moment. But you got to win this one if you want to even have a chance at getting in with just how insane the SEC is looking so far. And as you mentioned for Auburn, a team who's just looking to get into a bowl game, a team who they've looked good at times, but you've seen at some points they haven't been able to fully put it all together. They did just that last week against A&M. That's kind of what this team's been looking for, is that defining win, right, with Auburn. They're 2-5 in the conference, so it's not like they're beating up opponents. They had that rough 4-game losing streak, kind of early to middle part of the season. But this means a lot to this team. You can beat your hated rivals. You can get bowl eligible, and most importantly, you can stop all the madness and the comments and whatnot between these two schools and saying, "Oh, we got you over this one for another year. Roll Tide, roll Tide." It could be War Eagle. It could be War Eagle, especially after the loss last week from Bama. I don't know. We'll see if Kalen DeBoer can rally the troops, and we'll see how this Iron Bowl is going to go this upcoming Saturday. I'm looking forward to it, though. What about you, Vincent?
Boy, the state of Alabama is on fire right now. I'm going to start out punt, Bama, punt. December 2nd, 1972. Now, a lot of people will question Hugh Freeze and his coaching ability and what has happened at Auburn. Auburn has lost some tough games this year. What's held Hugh Freeze back is he's not had great play at the quarterback position. You see what happened when he got great play from Patrick Thorne, how good the War Eagles can be. Cam Coleman, after they win over Texas A&M, the star freshman wide receiver, he started to really put that smoke to Alabama, and he's talking a lot in the media. So this is going to be an Auburn team who's going to come in with house money. Boy, let me tell you something, gentlemen. Yesterday, once I got home, I turned on to my favorite station over there in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And boy, they was livid. Kalen DeBoer over his head. Unacceptable. Jalen Merrow, overrated. It was, I would say, 2 hours of the best radio that I've heard online in the last month. They had one caller that called in and said that Alabama under Caleb DeBoer has went from being Beyonce to Whoopi Goldberg now. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. Okay. I watched the Alabama-Oklahoma game last week at Buffalo Wild Wings. I saw Jalen Merrow warming up. I said, there was no way Alabama was not going to play the way they did that evening. Did I think the Roll Tide defense was going to give up 257 yards rushing to an Oklahoma team? Of course not. Did I think Jalen Merrow was going to throw 3 interceptions, one of them go for a pick 6? But the one thing I came from this game, and Logan, I'm so glad that we got a former great NFL player that played the game at the college level, high level, Colorado State. Harper, let me ask you this. When you seen Alabama struggling last week, is it the head coach's responsibility? He had to do something to bring that team, because Alabama was in that game really all the way up till Jalen Merrow threw them 2 back-to-back interceptions in the third quarter. And I just thought that Alabama, from a coaching standpoint that night, just didn't have it. And that really stuck out of my mind. But let me tell you something. The Tide still got an opportunity to make the college football playoffs if some things happen over this weekend. Nothing is lost, but it's more pressure now with this Iron Bowl. You got to beat Auburn. It's no question about it. Your opportunities are still there, because I still think it's going to be some teams that are going to lose this weekend. But how ironic the pressure is over there at Tuscaloosa right now. And I think about Alabama, I think about their football history. And I heard some of the callers say, well, Bear Bryant, look what he did in his tenure. Look what Nick Saban did in his tenure. Well, I want to tell all you Alabama fans, I'm looking in the camera right now. When they weren't coaching, what was the Alabama program under Mike Shula, Ray Perkins? Y'all did win one with Gene Stallings, but after that, it wasn't that y'all was, what I say, upper epsilon. But when I said I was happy, listening to that, that made my day. Back to you, Harper.
Well, I'll tell you this. I played in some places where it doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to go well for you. And I felt that that's what it was like in Norman, Oklahoma. They scored a touchdown, Alabama did, late in the game, and it was called back and a little ticky-tack, ineligible man downfield. I mean, it was close enough to where you got to be kidding me. The quarterback's rolling out, and they make that call. That doesn't change the game, in my opinion, all that much, but it does give Alabama something to kind of hang their hat on in terms of, okay, we're going to fight like crazy. It still wasn't going to happen, in my opinion, but that's not coaching. That's not playing. It's just the stuff doesn't happen, and that does occur. The Bama fans need to realize that that's happened to other teams more than you'll ever know, where they go into Tuscaloosa and they're visiting and things just don't work out. And you think that's Alabama magic. It's just the stuff that occurs every now and then. But Beyonce to Whoopi Goldberg, dude, that got me there right there. That's a classic, right? That I see and I feel that one. But let's move on. Number 5, I'm going to ask you guys a question. When Notre Dame at 10-1 goes to USC and plays at the LA Memorial Coliseum, I'm wondering if a 10-1 team that loses to Northern Illinois, and if they don't have that loss, are we still talking about Notre Dame the same way? Because strength of schedule, certainly they've been lucky in terms of this year. Some of the teams that they've been playing that haven't been that good, now minus Army and Navy, they're both better, but still Notre Dame is a lock to be in this unless they lose. Now, do you allow a 10-2 Notre Dame team that has losses to Northern Illinois and University of Southern California? I know I'm projecting. I'm not supposed to do that. But, Vincent, we'll start with you. We'll talk about the Irish just a little bit. What are your thoughts of that? And if you can, give me your comment on whether or not you think the Irish, the schedule is what it is. And if you go 10-1, which they are, and if they go 11-1, I have no problem with them being in it. But what about a 10-2 Irish team?
Let's address the elephant in the room. Notre Dame has been a powerhouse ever since college football has been in existence. From the 30s under Newt Rockne, the Parseghian, the Holtz. They got their own network on NBC. They broke away from everybody and developed their own network to have all their games televised. And they touched down Jesus. Me personally, I have a problem with Notre Dame. As you just said, Harper, they haven't really played a tough schedule. They lost to Northern Illinois, which is a bad loss. And you look at what's going on in the Big Ten and the SEC. How can you even put the same breath when you talk about Notre Dame against teams like Alabama, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Ohio State, or Oregon? But they touched down Jesus. They the premier program. They say when Notre Dame makes the college football playoffs, everybody goes up because the television ratings go up. So when I look at the Irish football team, Marcus Freeman, I love him as a head coach. Riley Leonard is a player. And they should beat USC. There's no question about it. So going in at 11-1, we need to get ready for Notre Dame being in the college football playoffs. That's plain and simple. Do I think they deserve to be number 5? Of course not. Do I think they deserve to be in the college football rankings right now? Of course not. Because you lost to Northern Illinois and your schedule. Come on, man. If Notre Dame was independent right now, what would they be in the SEC week in and week out? What would they be even in the Big Ten week in and week out. Even in the Big 12, what would they be in week in and week out? To me, that answers your question. Now the USC, California YA, the City of Angels, Lincoln Riley, I guarantee you, he's looking for another job. Rumors are he's looking at that Baylor job. Because if they get beat by Notre Dame, I'd be shocked that he be the head coach of USC next year. As one Mr. Stephen Travers, Take 5 with Travers tells you, he's a USC alumni. They're not happy with the young man from Lufkin, Texas. So USC, I'm going to say this, Lincoln Riley, you got money out there from USC. You got the money from LA. Maybe Hollywood is not for you. You're going to probably come home. And I'd be wrong if I don't mention this. Every time I think about the Notre Dame USC game and the young man that's on the screen with me, Mr. Harper LeBel, we get excited when we talk about the 74 game. Anthony Davis, J.K. McKay, Pat Hayden, Clay Matthews. But however, they're not coming through the door on Saturday. To you, Mr. Landers.
Harper, to answer your question you posed earlier, Notre Dame is an anomaly, right? Like Vincent said, they broke off. They have their own streaming network. You look at them, they're an independent school, so they're not in a major conference. They're kind of on their own island in a way. And it's always interesting because you hear this discussion every single year that Notre Dame does good. It's, well, who have they played? And they're not in a conference. They're not in a major conference. So those are always going to be two kind of just traits that people are always going to say about Notre Dame. And if they lose this game against USC rather, that's going to have a lot of people talking because it looks like there's going to be a lot of 2-loss teams in this top 12, maybe 3. I don't know. We'll see how this week shakes out. But I know for one thing, they better win this game if they want a shot at getting in. They've beaten the teams they should beat, except for Northern Illinois. But that's just how the strength of schedule plays out. That, there's nothing we can really do about that, and nothing that the school can do about that. That's just who they're supposed to play. But look, other than that, Notre Dame, that one loss they've had on the year to Northern Illinois, they've been rattling off win after win after win after win. A couple of highlights, teams that they did beat who were ranked at the time. They did beat Texas A&M week 1. They were ranked number 20. They beat Louisville at the time, who was ranked number 15, 31-24. They beat Navy. They blew them out 51-14. And then, as we know, their last win against Army, 49-14, big win in that one. But the thing that impresses me about this Notre Dame team isn't necessarily their offense, it's their defense. They don't give up many points at all. And if this Notre Dame defense comes to play like they should, like they have been pretty much all season, I expect a big win from touchdown Jesus, Vincent, as you like to say. And for USC, man, what a weird turn this school has taken. When you talked about Lincoln Riley, you talked about all the hype. They just had Caleb Williams, who's the number 1 overall draft pick, Heisman candidate winner, whatnot. And how sharp this team was. The whole thing last year with this team, the USC team, was their offense is phenomenal, but they can't stop a traffic cone. But when you look at it this year, they just can't it's just one thing after another. They can't really build any momentum. They haven't had a win streak above 3 this year. You've only won back-to-back games. You haven't won 3 in a row all season. And when you look at the wins they do have, like you said, LSU opening week 1, 27-20. But some of the other big games you've lost. You lost by 3 to Michigan, who was ranked at the time. You also lost by 3 to Penn State, who was ranked number 4. But after that, you haven't played a ranked team. And you've been very ho-hum. You've won 1, you've lost 1. You're off back-to-back wins, but they're against Nebraska and UCLA. Both those teams are not ranked. So this Trojans team is just, it doesn't feel like they're moving up. It feels like, if anything, they're going backwards or they're staying stagnant at best, is how I've seen this Trojan program. And Vincent, like you said, Lincoln Riley might be on Indeed, might be on any other of the job hosting websites, because he might not be out there in sunny California for a whole lot longer with the way this 10 years went. Because let's not forget, when he went over there, glitz, glamour, Hollywood, red carpet, championships. There's one thing lacking all that, gentlemen. That's championships. And USC, they're not getting it this year. Like I said, at best, they're just fighting for a bowl win. So I think that Notre Dame will roll in this one. I think that Marcus Freeman, look, when he first got to Notre Dame, there were some losses on this team that everyone looked at, kind of like what we talked about with Kalen DeBoer in Alabama, saying, look, man, you're at a prestigious school. You can't lose these games. With the history this team has, especially at Notre Dame, for God's sake, you have to get these wins. And other than the one loss, as we mentioned, to Northern Illinois, Notre Dame has had a really good season. They have one of the best defenses in all of college football. So I think Notre Dame will roll this week, and I think they'll get the big win over the USC Trojans.
Well, another great defense that we'll talk about right here and now is at Texas. You talk about glitz and glamour. If you're in Austin, Texas, you don't get any glitzier or more glamorous than rooting on the Longhorns. They're 10-1 right now, just like Notre Dame is. But now they've got to go to Kyle Field, and there'll be 103,000 people minus a few that are able to get tickets for the Longhorns that'll be rooting against you. Giga Mags. I think this is going to be another great game. We'll start with you, Logan. Your thoughts here first about Texas going against A&M. You're both ranked right now. A&M has had, like South Carolina, a very interesting season that they could really top it off if they come up with it. I'll call it an upset win against the Longhorns.
Yeah, no doubt about that, Harper. Texas, look, besides the loss to Georgia earlier in the season, they've looked sharp. They've looked good. They've had big wins, against good teams. They beat Michigan early on, who was ranked. They beat Vanderbilt. They barely beat Vanderbilt because Vanderbilt's been, I don't know, whenever the going gets tough, Vanderbilt gets going because they've played tough ball all year. So that's been a good team. But, I mean, they've beaten the teams they're supposed to. You beat up on Florida. You beat up on Arkansas. You only got 20 points, though. And then last week, as you mentioned, they were off last week. They beat Kentucky 31-14. So, with Texas, I think that Quinn Ewers and company, they've got a good program. They've got a really good roster. And look, they're a really good team overall. Offense, defense. I think, obviously, there's a reason why they're ranked so high right now because they just get the job done. Besides the loss to Georgia, you've been beating teams, and that's what you're supposed to do. Now, as for A&M, as we talked a little bit about earlier, they had the heartbreaking loss to Auburn last week in an absolute college football classic. But A&M, they've looked good against certain teams. And in some teams, in some of the wins they've had, it's been a lot closer, right? So, I mean, you beat a couple of teams by a few points, like Arkansas, you beat them 21-17, close when they're Bowling Green. You won 26-20. So, for me, I'm trying to see what type of team is Texas A&M going to bring out against Texas? Is it going to be Marcel Reed doing his thing? Is he going to have a great performance? Because when you look at his numbers, 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 11 sacks. I mean, he's not lighting the world on fire in terms of quarterback play. He's more so of a game manager. But can the running attack get it going? A team that has 26 rushing touchdowns led by Le'Veon Moss and Amar Daniels behind him. Can the receiving core with Noah Thomas and Barber get it going? Can this defense get something going as well? 23 sacks on the year. Can you improve on that against this Texas team who, look, it's a Texas team. They've got some big guys up front. They've got some absolute hosses up there, guys who didn't miss no meals. And you've got an elusive quarterback. You've got Quinn Ewers, who still has a lot of high draft potential in him, as well as a bunch of great targets. So for me, I think that Texas A&M will come out, give them a nice fight. But I think overall Texas with the Longhorns have a better program. And I think it'll be Hook 'em Horns this upcoming Saturday, Harper.
Last game.
Vincent, go right ahead. Go right ahead, bud.
Southwest Conference brings back memories. Man, can you look how great the SEC is now? This game obviously is for a berth in a championship game that's going to be held in Atlanta. Texas win this game. Can you think about Longhorn Nation that's going to touch down in Atlanta with Dog Nation? Can you imagine how downtown Atlanta is going to be? Around where your stumping grounds at Georgia State, Harper? Man, that's going to be something that's going to be always in your memory bank. Texas, Steve Sarkisian, I didn't know what type of football team y'all were after y'all got spanked by Georgia. I thought y'all was a little bit overrated. But Texas is Sarkisian is guiding the ship. Last week, the most important part in that Kentucky game that I came away with, Texas ran the ball 47 times for 250 yards and averaged 5.3 yards a carry. That's power football there. So it brought back memories of me of thinking about Texas as Chris Gilbert, Cedric Benson, Earl Campbell, Ricky Williams, Roosevelt Leaks. I said, okay, the Longhorns, they finally got it right. You got to have a running game. Now to the Texas A&M Aggies. You still got everything in the game. College football playoff rankings, you win this game, you come to Atlanta, you win the SEC championship game, you win. Mike Elko, I think you've done an outstanding job out there in the 12th man out there in College Station. You got an outstanding defensive line in Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart, Nick Skolson, who's rated one of the top DBs in the 2025 NFL draft. Marcel Reed, as you mentioned, Logan is an outstanding football player out of the city of Nashville, Tennessee, another Tennessean. But when you look at this game, I think Texas is on a mission. I think they're going to go into College Station, and I think they're going to win a game handily. I think this is a different Texas team that's built in the days of the Alabamas and Georgias just a few years ago. When you can run the football on any level, and that gentleman right there that played in the league 11 years, that played at Colorado State. See, 100 yards football, we got somebody that can put the stamps and the receipts on this. He will tell you when you run that football and you able to, 90 to 100%, you're going to win the majority of your football games. Back to you, Mr. LeBel.
Well, you're going to have Texas win. You mentioned what it's going to be like when they come to Atlanta. There'll be a lot of burnt orange.
Yep.
Oh, yes.
Black, but I guarantee you more than any of that, there's going to be a lot of green because there are going to be some folks there not only to get here, but to have themselves a great time. That's the part. That's a whole different show that we can talk about the business of running these big games, not just the championship games, but how are most fans going to be able to afford to attend some of these ball games? We'll find that out as it progresses. But boy, folks, you have a plethora of football to look at this weekend, and we hope that you find a game. We've talked about the ones that we think are going to be a pinnacle in how the college playoff is shaped and formed, and with conference championships and everything else that's a part of that. And we're glad that you tuned in to be a part of it. Well, Logan Landers, our producer and engineer, thank you for participating with us, Logan. For Vincent Turner, our host and gracious one at that, I'm Harper LeBel. We want to say thank you for tuning in to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is the college football edition, the Super 7, and we appreciate you being a part of it today. Have a great and very happy Thanksgiving, all of you, and save a plate, put some cellophane around it, put your name on it, put it in the back of the refrigerator so you can pull it out either Friday, Saturday, or even on Sunday to watch some of the great football. So thank you for tuning in, everybody. Have a wonderful rest.